Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. I'm going to be using the word XXer in this video for, the people in our society who have long hair and wear dresses, because maybe this way it will be less likely that I will be picked on by a certain video hosting site that I'm posting this video on their website, right? So I'm going to be using the term XXers, so I think you all know exactly who I'm referring to. It actually makes perfect sense that top guys would be in favor of XXer empowerment, aka the movement that starts with an FEM. You know the movement I'm talking about. And it makes sense that they would promote XXer empowerment because XXer empowerment is largely about quote-unquote XXer sexual empowerment. What does that mean? It just means being a lady of the night who doesn't get paid. What does this mean? It means that it's easier for top guys to get sex from lots of XXers and get it without having to give XXers anything. Top guys have always gotten more sex than the average guy, but maybe they had to have a mistress or two and, pay for an apartment or something, and maybe they had to force themselves on a maid or something at their own house or something, and they could get in big trouble for that, right? Whatever. My point is that in the past, it was not easy to get sex from lots and lots of XXers. They couldn't easily bang hundreds or thousands of XXers in a lifetime. Sure, there was the exception, the one or two guys who could bang that many XXers even back then, but there were very, very few. Even not all aristocrats were able to bang that many. But now, if you're just a top 1% guy, maybe even just a top 5% guy, you can bang hundreds or thousands of XXers in your lifetime. In the past, it was probably more like, 0.0000001% of the population could do that. But now it's like, 1%, maybe even 5% can bang that many XXers. It makes it easier for the top guys to get sex when XXers are part of that XXer empowerment movement, because XXer empowerment is about promotion of XXer so-called sexual empowerment, which is just turning XXers into ladies of the night who don't get paid. So obviously these top guys, and I don't even think it's necessarily an intentional strategy on their part, although it may be, I don't even necessarily think they're fooling XXers, like, they're just scumbag guys. I think these, at least not in that sense, right? Like, I think these guys, at least a lot of them, like the Joss Whedons of the world, I think these guys actually believe what they're saying. I think they actually are in favor of XXer empowerment. I think they actually think that XXer sexual empowerment is a harmless and good thing. I think they actually do think that regular guys are intimidated by strong XXers, right? And maybe normal guys are a little bit intimidated by strong XXers, but considering the only way to have a stable, functional, moral, prosperous, happy, virtuous, quickly technologically advancing society is by having monogamy, considering that, why would any guy be insecure about any so-called empowered XXer? Because if XXers are only marrying as virgins, which they used to do, and which they should still be doing, or if XXers are able to commit, then why would he feel insecure about her being strong? Because every 1 out of 10 guy would be with a 1 out of 10 XXer if he wanted an XXer. Every 5 out of 10 guy would be with a 5 out of 10 XXer. Every 10 out of 10 guy would be with a 10 out of 10 XXer, you see? So why would a guy be insecure around an XXer of his own SMV, right? See what I mean? But XXer empowerment puts misandric laws into place that boosts XXers' SMV by forcing men to simp because of being unable to get sex because of the outlawing of prostitution, as well as because of the welfare for XXers who have kids when they don't have a husband, taking away the consequences when XXers engage in promiscuity. Meaning like, XXers who have kids when they don't have a husband, those people, I don't even want to use that two-word term for those people because of, this website's tyrannical censorship. But those people, those XXers who have kids when they don't have a husband, welfare takes away the consequences for that, right? And so then these XXers can engage in promiscuity and other things, and this boosts their SMV, at least temporarily, and especially on a society-wide level. It also gets XXers to do what is not in their own best interest, that is, waste their teens and 20s getting with a lot of guys. Their kids are going to be less healthy because of her having kids in her 30s instead of in her 20s. They will start getting serious about finding a husband too late to find one, and will have to settle for a guy who is worse than she could have gotten if she had started looking for a husband at 16 and had not had sex until her wedding night. She'll have less healthy kids because of her kids being born later in life. She'll have less energy to raise them because of her being older, and will therefore be an atrocious parent, or will be more exhausted all the time because she's older and more tired because of raising kids in her 30s instead of her 20s. And she will then be an abysmal mother because of setting a bad example for her kids by fighting with her husband all the time, both traumatizing her children and making sure that her children will have worse romantic relationships because of the bad example they saw in their parents, who fought all the time because of their mother's inability to love her husband because of having been promiscuous before finding her husband. And the mother will be able to have fewer kids as well because if she marries at 30 and it takes her a year to get pregnant, then she'll be giving birth at about 32 years old. And then it might take another year or two to get pregnant with her second child because she's less fertile due to her age, and then she'll be having her second child at maybe the age of 34, and then she might not be able to get pregnant again for a third child, or she might only be able to have one more child. And so if she wants to have 4 or 5 kids, she won't be able to because she spent her 20s getting with a lot of guys instead of getting married when she was 21 or 22 like she should have done, which is when an XXer is supposed to get married at, 18 to 23. So it's not in XXers' best interest to be so-called sexually empowered XXers, aka promiscuous. But it is in the best interest of the top guys in terms of them getting as much sex as they want. That is, the top guys getting as much sex as they want. It does help those guys get a bunch of sex when XXers are so-called sexually empowered. And when these guys support the XXer sexual empowerment, it does, benefit them in that way, which is why I think top guys support feminism. Guys like Joss Whedon, Grant Morrison, and tons of them, And the bottom 80% of XXers get that added SMV that is taken from the bottom 80% of men, and the top 20% of men get the added SMV that is taken from the top 20% of XXers. See, when you have a situation, a society like the society that we have today, you have both the top 20% of XXers and the bottom 80% of men losing SMV. And you have the bottom 80% of XXers and the top 20% of men gaining an SMV. And this is the way it is now, even though this is not the way it's supposed to be, of course. So let's see here, yada, 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 yada. Even top XXers have their SMV lowered to benefit the SMV of the bottom 80% of XXers. So when XXers are so willing and able to divorce rape men, then why wouldn't a man be insecure, so-called insecure, around an XXer who is his same SMV, but because of society being all screwed up, she's actually higher in SMV than he is, and thus has more options, and thus he is quote-unquote insecure. Throughout all of human history, her SMV would have been the same as his. Let's say in a sane world, they'd both be 6 out of 10. Today, such a guy is going to be insecure around her because he's not her first sexual partner. She has tons of options. XXers are not faithful. And even if he marries her, that's not going to be any kind of guarantee of fidelity or love or obedience or loyalty or anything. She's going to have a big head, a big ego, because she knows her SMV is higher than his, even though it really should not be. She thinks she's a 7, or is actually a 7, even though she's not really a 7. She is a 7 in power because, of men's SMV being lowered and XXers' SMV being artificially boosted by the misandric laws and the XXers' promiscuity on a society-wide scale, right? So she feels justified in acting like she's a 7, even if she secretly knows she's probably or thinks that she's just a 6, right? And he's basically a 5, even though he's an above average guy and should actually be classified in a sane world as a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10, right? And she doesn't realize that her SMV should not be higher than his. She just knows that it is. And so she has to settle for him, dynamics being what they are, reality being what it is. But she resents that. And XXers are hypergamous. They're always trading up, and he knows this. He doesn't even have to have any MGTOW teachings about it or any knowledge from his father. He instinctively knows in his subconscious that XXers are hypergamous, and he knows that she could leave him at any time, and probably will if she finds a better guy than him, especially since he did not take her virginity, you see? So of course he's going to be insecure around an XXer, even if she's his same SMV, or should be, would be in the past, although now she's above him in SMV because of all the misandric laws and because of the shortage of women caused by the promiscuous men taking way more than their fair share of the small amount of XXer libido available in a promiscuous society. The top guys benefit. The regular guys, the bottom 80% of guys, suffer in a promiscuous society like this. Right? They suffer from XXers' hypergamy, but the top guys benefit from that hypergamy. I mean, sometimes they suffer from it too, right? Like, because XXers are never satisfied, and there's nothing holding them to top guys either, not really, not as much. Not if she can find an even richer, even smarter, even more charming, or even better looking, or even more loving guy than her top 1% husband. She might leave her husband, no matter how great her husband is, if she finds a better guy who wants her. So it does backfire sometimes. It harms top guys too. But in general, generally speaking, especially outside the bounds of marriage, if top guys don't get married, then yeah, it's to their benefit for there to be XXer empowerment in society. For XXers to be so-called sexually empowered. And even if bottom guys support XXer empowerment, it benefits the top guys. You know what I mean? XXers' hypergamy means that all the XXers are looking for better guys. And if you're a top 1% guy, then that's good for you. That works to your advantage. It benefits you because all the XXers are trading up to you. They're not trading up from you, they're trading up to you. They're leaving other guys. They're leaving their 7 out of 10 guy or their 8 out of 10 guy to get with you instead. You know, the 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 guy. Or they're leaving a 9 out of 10 guy to get with you, the 10 out of 10 guy. You see what I'm saying? So the top guys actually benefit from XXers' hypergamy, whereas the vast majority of guys suffer from XXers' hypergamy. So men instinctively know that XXers are hypergamous. So when XXers are free, like under XXer empowerment, like today, and there's no natural economic dynamics or freedom, aka danger dynamics, or violence dynamics or anything like that, dynamics which would exist under anarcho-capitalism. When there's no natural dynamics like that, dynamics which incentivize XXers to be monogamous or settle down or be faithful, aka to not be hypergamous, to not cheat, etc., like there would be under anarcho-capitalism, when you instead have the state, the government, protecting and subsidizing XXers' so-called freedom and preventing natural dynamics from happening by outlawing prostitution and helping XXers who have children when they're not married or seriously dating a guy, and when government is furthermore outlawing violence against XXers even if she cheats, then this allows XXers to be way more hypergamous and unfaithful than they would normally be able to get away with being, such as under anarcho-capitalism or even under libertarianism. So this means that, of course, guys are going to be insecure around XXers of their own SMV, and the men like Joss Whedon call this insecurity. Like, guys are just insecure for no reason. Like, they're just weak. Like, these guys are just immoral. Like, the bottom 80 or 90% of men are just chauvinists. Like, they're just ignorant. Like, they're just scumbags. Like, they're just oppressive assholes. Like, normal men just want to control XXers because of them not being masculine enough to be comfortable being with a powerful XXer. This whole idea is just total crap. It's totally delusional. Guys like Joss Whedon are total pussy hounds, total pussy worshippers. Joss Whedon cheated on his wife like crazy with tons of XXers for years and years. So he's one of those guys that massively benefits from XXers being hypergamous and promiscuous. From XXers, you know, being so-called sexually empowered, you know? Whereas regular guys are the ones being turned into incels or having their XXer girlfriends cheat on them with guys like Joss Whedon. So obviously regular guys are going to be insecure and are not going to like XXer empowerment because it's harming regular guys. And of course the top guys are going to like XXer empowerment because it benefits them. But of course it benefits those top guys at the cost of societal stability, at the cost of morality in society, at the cost of peace, at the cost of prosperity, at the cost of freedom, at the cost of, and when I say prosperity, I mean society-wide prosperity, and thus, you know, societal stability, not, you know, the prosperity of the guys at the top, because they benefit, basically, or at least it seems like they do. You know, at the cost of peace, at the cost of prosperity, the cost of freedom, at the cost of love and virtue and happiness and all the good things which are destroyed when society is turned promiscuous because of XXers' so-called sexual empowerment and them being subsidized and all the rest of it, you know. All good things are thrown under the bus to benefit top men and their insatiable sexual appetite. You see? So XXer empowerment, of course it's going to be supported by top men. But this is not something neutral. It's not like, well, it's just a matter of opinion whether it's good or bad. It depends on whether you're a top guy or a bottom guy. No, it's not a matter of opinion because it destroys all of society. And then that's bad for everybody in society, including the top men, but especially for the whole human race, especially including all the people of the future. You know, assuming we even survive as a species. You know, maybe people born hundreds of years from now will be suffering more than they otherwise would be because of what we're allowing today. You know, because whether we reestablish freedom or grind forward, making slow progress under absolute tyranny, you know, 1984 type tyranny, may very well determine the direction that humanity ultimately evolves in. Whether we go down the road of virtue or go down the road of evil. Assuming that evil is even a viable path, I don't think it is, but who knows. It's pretty simple. We're harming the people of the future by tolerating this XXer empowerment crap, this male promiscuity crap. It's putting the whole human race in danger of extinction. And even if it doesn't make the human race go extinct, by not fighting this evil, it lowers the standard of living for all the people of the future and it changes the course of human history for the worse. And it decides which empires are in existence, what powers they have, etc., so that when other technological advancements are made in the future, certain roads will be gone down with those technologies, then that will influence the direction of the evolution of the entire human race, and also make it more or less likely that we will survive the next crisis that threatens human survival. It's not a matter of opinion whether XXer sexual empowerment is good or bad. No, it harms all of humanity. It even harms the top guys, both in terms of getting them divorce raped too, and in terms of them becoming more sexually degenerate because of being totally jaded because of the ease of obtaining sex with lots of XXers, and as well as depriving those top guys of the higher standard of living that would come with faster technological development. So the XXer empowerment movement is harming top guys too, in multiple ways. But you see, they don't see that. These top guys don't, because they're idiots. Because they're living in their ivory towers, enjoying their lives, rather than seeking truth or justice or anything like that. But it's not a matter of opinion whether male promiscuity, and therefore the hypergamy and the XXer empowerment promiscuity, and the male disenfranchisement and the gynocentrism and the simping that all go together, that all arises from the male promiscuity and from the cowardice of the bottom 80% of men who are refusing to hold the top men, the promiscuous men, accountable with force, lethal force if necessary. It's not a neutral thing. It's not a matter of opinion, like I said before, whether this stuff is good or bad. The truth is that this stuff is objectively bad for everyone, including the people at the top of society. Another aspect of the whole men supporting XXer empowerment thing, especially men at the top supporting the XXer empowerment movement, another aspect of it is the whole femdom thing. I think that's the term. The whole dominatrix type of thing. Like men who pay XXers to whip them or mistreat them in other ways. Like these guys are often so powerful that everybody has to do what they say. They're a CEO of a big company or a powerful director or a big shot, a bigwig, an important person in some other way, right? So these guys, they have underlings and their subordinates have subordinates. I meant subordinates, right? These guys, they have subordinates, and their subordinates have subordinates, and then their subordinates' subordinates have subordinates. These guys have a lot of power, right? They're really far up the chain, right? Up the ladder. So their word is law, basically, right? Kind of like an aristocrat or a king or an emperor in the past, right? So these guys get tired of being in charge. They want to be not in charge. So I think this whole supporting XXer empowerment thing that also stems from the whole thing that makes them want to see dominatrixes. That same thing also makes them want to support, the XXer empowerment movement. It's this whole, I don't want to be in charge all the time, but I'm attracted to XXers, but yet I don't want to be in charge of XXers. I want them to be in charge of me, right? But they're not actually in charge of me because I'm just voluntarily giving up my power temporarily because I actually do have a ton of power. It's that type of thing. And because the guy is so powerful, he's in charge of lots of men and is more powerful than most men in society. And so in a sense, it's not really cuckish of him to be bossed around by his XXer friend, his the XXer who he's dating, or his spouse or mistress or dominatrix or whatever. In a sense, it is cuckish, but in another sense, it's not cuckish or simpish or whatever, because it's not like she's likely to trade up from him, right? If it's his spouse or whatever, right? Because he's the top. He's the guy at the top, right? There are a few guys who are better than him, so she's not going to trade up from him, but yet he doesn't want to be in charge at home as well, because being in charge in his job is stressful, right? So when he comes home, he wants to relax. So not being in charge is relaxation for him. So he likes it when his XXer, who he's dating, or his spouse or his mistress is in charge. He likes it when she bosses him around, stuff like that. And so this whole cuckish but not really cuckish type of relationship that XXers have with these top guys often, these relationships that these top guys often have with their XXers is another reason why these guys support XXer empowerment. But I guess it's sort of related to the other thing about it benefiting top guys. XXers not trading up from these guys, XXers trade up to these guys. So since there are no guys who might take his XXer from him, or not very many, and maybe he is totally confident that she's never going to leave him, right? So there seems to be no threat there, right? He thinks that there's no way in hell she's ever going to leave him for somebody else. So he thinks that it's weak or cowardly or unnecessary or chauvinistic or oppressive for other guys, bottom 80% guys, to be in charge of their own spouse, or to not like XXers who are bossy, right? Like regular guys don't want an XXer who's bossy, and they want to be in charge of their own XXer. Like bottom 80% guys are like that, right? But it's not because they're weak or cowardly or chauvinistic or oppressive, although that's how the top guys interpret it, right? The top guy thinks that's weakness, chauvinistic, sexist weakness, because he's not insecure, because he's not quote-unquote insecure with his XXer. She would never cheat on him, and he feels secure in that belief, and he likes being bossed around. And if she did leave him, he would just find another XXer, and it'd be super easy for him, because he's a top 1% guy, or more like a top 0.1% guy. But it's not like that for regular guys, because of the promiscuity of these top guys, which makes it hard for the bottom 80% of guys to get a decent XXer, right? And also because of the degenerate culture, the promiscuous, polygamous culture that has been created by these top guys, right? So, it's totally delusional for these top guys to look down on regular guys and act like they're just insecure, weak, sexist, etc., and wanting to control XXers. The view held by top men is ridiculous. They're totally deluded. And a lot of these top guys don't have lasting marriages anyway. It's the middle class guys who have the marriages that last. The guys who are so-called oppressive of their XXer, they're the ones with the lasting marriages. So who's actually being smarter here? Who's actually more in tune with female nature? Obviously, it's the middle class guys, right? They spend their, half of them spend their whole life, 40, 50 years married to the same XXer. Whereas top guys have marriage that lasts 10, maybe 15, maybe, if they're lucky, 20 years, right? But in general, these guys' marriages don't last because these guys are psychos. They're selfish, they're foolish, they live in an ivory tower, they cheat, they engage in sexual degeneracy, they don't understand hypergamy properly, and so they don't realize that, yes, even their wife will trade up to another top guy just like him, or she'll divorce him and get a huge, payday and live off his money. You know what I mean? So these top guys are delusional. They don't understand the dynamic going on. But I think the whole thing I just talked about in this segment of the video is, I think, another reason why these guys support XXer empowerment and support the idea of XXers being strong and empowered and sexually liberated and all that stuff. And as far as the strong part of the equation is concerned, I think these top men like XXers being strong and independent, making their own money, because then they're probably less likely, the XXers are, to sue for palimony if they can already take care of themselves because those XXers are already having their own career. And if she has her own career, she's also probably less likely to pressure him to get serious about her, to marry her or whatever. And since most, interactions that these guys have with XXers are ones where it's not serious, this means that it's to these guys' benefit if these XXers support themselves and are less needing to marry him and are therefore less likely to use status as sexual gatekeeper as leverage against him to get him to marry her by keeping her legs closed, right? So it's to these guys' advantage to support the XXer empowerment movement. I think it's not widely understood why XXer sexual empowerment is bad. It's not just because they lose pair bonding ability and they abuse the power and stuff. And it's also because of another fact, but it's not just because of this either. It's also because of the fact that their span of beauty is shorter, which means they're incentivized to be hypergamous, to move on quicker, to bounce from guy to guy until they find the best guy they can find, as other MGTOW men have said. So if they're not choosing their mate by their father choosing their mate for them, or at least picking out the candidates, or at least having veto power over who she wants to date, then she's going to lose her virginity if her father's not controlling her like that, she's going to lose her virginity to some guy who's a bad guy, or who's not, totally serious about her, and then she's going to get her heart ripped out because she doesn't end up staying with that guy. And then after that, she can't bond with any of her future sexual partners, or at least not much, and then she's kind of a psychopath after that. Just going along, seeking self-advantage as quickly and as ruthlessly and as hypergamously as possible. Know what I mean? But regarding this whole sexual empowerment thing, corporations and top guys act like guys are insecure with an XXer who is sexually empowered. I think you got to think about the sexual act itself to understand how this is a false interpretation. Like, what is happening when a guy is having sex with an XXer? Either she's emotionally moved by the experience, in which case he does have power over her. It's not her having power, it's him having power over her because she's a virgin and so she's bonding with him and now she's kind of his slave, right? Because she'll do anything to stay with him because she's so attached to him because he took her virginity and she sexually pair bonded him. But if she's not a virgin, especially if she's slept with quite a few guys, then at most he's giving her a nice physical time like a massage. It's just a physical experience. It doesn't really have any emotional impact for her. It doesn't change her or make her love him or touch her in any kind of deep way. So what's her power there? These promiscuous XXers, what is their power the guys are supposedly intimidated by? Their power is the power of not caring. That's all it is. What's her power there? Know what I mean? She has no power when she's having sex other than being not affected by it. It not meaning anything to her, like a slore, like a literal prostitute. She can just lie back and let it happen and take it or leave it. Either he does what she wants or she can just kick him out. Or she's getting recompensed in some way, and so she's basically just waiting for it to be over because it means nothing to her, the sex. You know what I mean? It doesn't affect her in the slightest. That's her power. That's the power of a sexually empowered XXer. That's basically a form of psychopathy. Know what I mean? This intimate thing doesn't even affect her at all. This intimate act doesn't even affect her at all anymore because she's, had sex with too many guys. Even though it does affect most XXers, or at least a large percentage of XXers who lose their virginity to a guy. Like with people who are unable to feel pain. There really are such people. There are people who are unable to feel pain. It sounds like it'd be a great power, right? It's not. It means they can get injured and not even know it. It can be very life-threatening to have that condition to where you can't feel pain. Similar to XXers not caring about sex. That psychopathic power of not being able to be emotionally affected by sex is not a healthy power. It's an evil power, a destructive power, a self-destructive power that arises from having become a psychopath due to engaging in promiscuity. And having 2 or 3 sexual partners in a lifetime is promiscuity. If you're an XXer, not caring is an evil power, and that's the power that sexually liberated XXers have. How is that a good thing? How is that not something to be scared of? That is something to be scared of. Psychopaths are to be feared. You don't want to have anything to do with a psychopath. They're dangerous. They don't give a fuck about you. That is something scary. Especially when you're engaging in an act that can make you fall in love with the other person, this XXer. If she doesn't care about you and can't care about you and never will care about you and sex means nothing to her, then it's like you're putting yourself in this position where you might fall in love with this XXer who will never care about you. That is fucking terrifying. What sane person would do that? Not to mention it's unfair and it's unreciprocal, because if you care about her, then you'll be willing to sacrifice for her. But if she doesn't care about you, she won't be willing to sacrifice for you at all. She won't sacrifice her money or her life. She won't even sacrifice her time or her ego or anything. That is something terrifying. Psychopathy is terrifying. It's evil. It's destructive. It's dangerous. It's what MGTOW men are pointing out about XXers and are fearing, and rightly so. Men are right to fear XXer empowerment psychopathy. And men should fear male psychopathy as well. And male psychopathy is a sign of male psychopathy. And male promiscuity is a sign of male psychopathy. If you're going around having sex with tons of XXers, then you probably are a psychopath. Guys with a heart, guys with a conscience don't do that shit. Especially after they know that being promiscuous causes XXers to lose their pair bonding ability and their mental and emotional stability and their ability to be faithful. Once a decent guy knows that, then he really won't hook up with a lot of XXers. Maybe you could say that some guys do it out of ignorance, but if you know that it takes XXers' pair bonding ability away from them, and you're still doing it, then you really are a psychopath. It's really that simple. Psychopathy should be feared when it appears in XXers, and it should be feared when it appears in men. Psychopathy is a dangerous, destructive, non-productive thing. Yeah, evolution created it because it's useful for survival on an individual level, but evolution is a blind force. Evolution is just trying to get everybody to survive on an individual level. It's not trying to get the species to survive. Evolution is not smart, so it doesn't know that it should actually be trying to get the species to survive. So psychopathy is a danger to the survival of our species. Psychopathy is good on an individual level, in a sense, because it can help the psychopath survive, right? It can help them survive and thrive. But on a species-wide level, psychopathy is very disadvantageous, very dangerous, because it puts the whole species in danger of going extinct. Top guys are very destructive. Psychopathy is a bad thing, whether in XXers or men, but especially in men, because these guys rise to the top, make a lot of money, have relations with hundreds or thousands of XXers, ruining a huge percentage of the country's XXers, and then those XXers set a bad example for other XXers. And then those XXers start being promiscuous, and it turns a huge percentage of XXers into psychopaths, and then you get non-functional marriages, you get messed up kids, you get a whole next generation that's totally jacked up. This leads to slower technological progress, less meritocracy, more poisoning of the environment, more political corruption, more war, more waste of money, more hedonism, more foolishness, more violence. Everything bad happens because of psychopathy. Psychopathy is a horrible, horrible thing. Sure, evolution designed it for individual survival, but that doesn't mean it's good for the survival of the species. Good may seem disadvantageous on an individual level, but it really isn't, as long as society is virtuous. But even if that were not the case, it's definitely advantageous to individuals when the whole collective is virtuous, because it's beneficial to the whole collective. And then the whole collective is advanced more. The whole collective benefits because all the people in the collective are being virtuous. And then everybody in the collective benefits from those collective benefits. So really, being virtuous is advantageous on an individual level if you live in a virtuous society. But even if it weren't advantageous on an individual level in a virtuous society, it is advantageous in a collective sense. In a virtuous society for everybody to be virtuous, because there's collective benefits, and then everybody shares in those benefits. So really, good is not disadvantageous, neither on an individual nor on a collective level. And psychopathy is really not advantageous, because while psychopathy helps you on an individual level, it slows down the progress of all humanity, making everyone's standard of living lower than it could be, and thus everyone suffers, including the psychopaths, and it also pushes humanity toward extinction. And you don't even get a benefit from psychopathy when everybody's being a psychopath. It just puts you at an advantage to good people, but it doesn't put you at an advantage to other psychopaths. So if everyone were to become a psychopath, then psychopaths would get no advantage. You see? And it would just waste a bunch of time and money and resources while everybody's trying to screw each other over all the time because of everybody being a psychopath. You see, so psychopathy is actually not advantageous at all. So, This is how it is. So really, XXer empowerment psychopathy is to be feared, and male psychopathy is to be feared as well. And I think perhaps top guys also don't condemn XXer empowerment, so-called sexual liberation, not only because it benefits them, but also because they're ignorant about the fact that XXer empowerment, sexual liberation, is something that if you're a psychopathic guy, then you're not going to realize how destructive XXer empowerment, sexual liberation is because of it encouraging XXer empowerment psychopathy. You know, if you're a top guy, the odds are higher that you're a psychopath or a partial psychopath. And if you're a full or partial psychopath, then this means that you don't recognize the validity of or the value of non-psychopathy, of compassion, of love, of loyalty, of all kinds of good things that society actually depends on, and that the survival of the human species depends on. I mean, you know, those things are valuable, but, you know, psychopaths are foolish because they're unable to recognize the validity and value of those things, like compassion and loyalty and love and all that, right? And honesty. And so since you, the psychopath, are morally blind, you're spiritually and emotionally blind if you're a psychopath, because of that psychopath's, psychopathy, he's not able to see why it's a bad thing when XXers are psychopaths. You know what I mean? And plus, these top guys are in less danger of being hurt by XXers' psychopathy because these top psychopathic guys are more savvy, more cynical, more vicious, more willing to blackmail, more wealthy, more intelligent, more cunning, more suspicious, etc. So then these guys can also deal with the psychopathy of promiscuous XXers much easier. But, you know, just objectively, it's also bad because this encourages psychopathy, and then XXers are made miserable, right? Normal XXers are miserable when they're promiscuous and when they're psychopaths because of being promiscuous. Now, I would say that some XXers are just born psychopaths, so maybe being promiscuous or becoming more psychopathic doesn't really hurt those particular XXers because they were born psychopathic, but the rest of XXers, the majority of XXers, yes, they're psychopathic in a sense because they're XXers, and psychopathy is an XXer trait, but in another sense, they're not hardcore psychopaths. They're not psychopaths. They're just, amoral, but some XXers are hardcore psychopaths like the top men are, right? So these XXers who are not psychopaths, they can be made into psychopaths by promiscuity. And when that happens, they are made utterly miserable and hollow by it. These psychopathic XXers who used to have souls are now dead inside due to their promiscuity. So this means that it really is harming most XXers to allow the encouragement of psychopathy in XXers by allowing the encouragement to promiscuity, so-called XXer sexual empowerment. So yeah, maybe these XXers don't hurt the top guys much, because the top guys can deal with those XXers, but it harms the majority of XXers. Maybe, 50 to 90% of XXers, the ones who aren't hardcore psychopaths. They just have that natural XXer amorality, but they're not hardcore psychopaths. It does harm that 50 to 90% of XXers by turning them into hardcore psychopaths because they're miserable and hollow and they feel dead inside and they don't have a husband, and so they're going to be super ruthless to get one no matter what, right? No matter what it takes. And they're unable to be happy anymore, no matter what. So all the happiness they seem to have is just totally feigned. It's just acting. That's all it is. They're not actually happy at all. And it harms the men who date and or marry those formerly safe XXers who used to have souls. Those XXers are dangerous now because they lost their souls. So they're not safe anymore. They're going to harm those men because they're unable to love. They're now hardcore psychopaths, and they can no longer reciprocate a man's love, etc. She's going to be able to trade up more easily and more quickly because she never really loved him because she lost her soul a long time ago by being promiscuous. So top guys have less to fear from psychopathic XXers, and they don't understand the damage that is done to normal XXers by becoming psychopathic because they themselves, these top guys, are psychopaths or partial psychopaths. These top guys have psychopathic genes. So they don't understand how bad psychopathy is, and they don't understand the value and the importance of the virtue and the satisfaction that comes with having a soul, being a decent person, having great compassion for others. They can't connect with people on that level because they're missing that part of what most human beings have. These psychopathic guys are missing that part of themselves because they were born without it. So they don't appreciate how bad XXer sexual empowerment is, how destructive to society it is. And so these top guys promote XXer empowerment. Because if they weren't psychopaths, they would realize how bad it is, and then they would not promote it. They would realize that it creates misery, hollowness, non-virtue, etc. They would not promote it because they would realize that it makes XXers miserable. They would not promote it if they were not psychopaths. They would not promote it because they would realize it is bad for the majority of men. The bottom 80 or 90% of men. It's bad for the majority of XXers. It's bad for societal stability. It's bad for prosperity. It's bad for freedom. It's bad for the survival of the human race. They'd realize it's bad for all that stuff, and so they would oppose it. But a huge percentage of the top guys are psychopaths. They have very little morality, and so they don't oppose XXer empowerment. They actually promote it because they're ignorant and because they have no interest in finding the truth, and because they would not even understand the truth even if it were explained to them, because they're psychopaths. You know what I mean? Just like a blind person doesn't understand when you try to explain red or blue or green to them. If they were born blind, they don't know what you're talking about. It makes no sense to them. You know what I mean? Like they can't relate to it really. You know, they don't really know what you're talking about at all. Same thing with the psychopath. You can try to explain compassion and love and satisfaction and contentment and peace and all this stuff to a psychopath, and he's just not really going to understand because he doesn't have the equipment to understand it. Just like a blind person doesn't have the equipment to see color. So really, there's little you can do with psychopaths other than to walk away and form your own commune that does not let any psychopaths in. Meaning doesn't let any male psychopaths in, and doesn't let any hardcore ruined female, XXer psychopaths in either, and which also kicks out any psychopaths that are born in the commune. You can't tolerate psychopathy. Psychopaths are just too destructive, too ignorant. Inherently ignorant, like I was just talking about. There's no enlightening them, because they don't have the equipment necessary to be enlightened. Just like a person with one leg and no prosthetic doesn't have the equipment to run and jump. Just like how an 85 IQ person is never going to understand advanced calculus, because his genes make it impossible for him to understand advanced calculus no matter how hard he tries. Similarly, a psychopath will never understand compassion or honor or loyalty or other things that non-psychopaths understand. The psychopath cannot understand these things because his genes don't allow him to do so. So this is another reason why psychopaths promote XXer empowerment and XXer sexual liberation and all this, because it benefits them, it doesn't harm them, or they don't think it harms them. It doesn't harm them as much as it harms regular guys. They don't understand how it harms XXers, or they don't care. They don't understand how it harms regular men, these top men, these psychopathic men just don't care. They're ignorant, and they're psychopathic, and they're selfish, and they don't want to see the truth, and if the truth were explained to them, they probably still would not understand it, because these men are psychopaths. So yeah, I think this needs to be understood, and I hope everybody understood what I was talking about in this video. This has been Redshift. I hope someone got something out of it. Peace trucks for promiscuous MGTOW men, because they are increasing gynocentrism, not decreasing it.